Okay, yeah, so I'm Ishan, I'm from the University of Edinburgh, and my presentation today is about a phenomenon of privacy paradox that we have observed among students, and we would like to also talk about the implications for learning analytics. So as Shane pointed out earlier in his keynote that we need greater attention to ethics in the field, especially in transitions of power and agency between different stakeholders. So this is not a new topic. There has been a lot of conversation around ethics and privacy issues related to the use of student data in higher education lately. I think okay, it's moving. So for example, the range and types of data collected for learning analytics has raised concerns about intrusions into spaces generally deemed private or personal. Learning analytics can be very useful for personalizing support, but a certain degree of linkages to individuals will be necessary in order to deliver customized interventions. So learning analytics has thus been criticized for its simply big brother approach. We can see that lots of discussions around the protection of privacy often revolve around the ownership of personal data. But ownership can be difficult to define after data has been collected and computed. We may say that data subjects, data infrastructure owners, and data analysts all have the right to claim some share of the data. And it has also been argued that learning analytics, while claiming to enhance student agency in learning, is self-conflicting in a seemingly anti-democratic manner of its massive and constant data collection process. And furthermore, due to information asymmetry between data collectors and data subjects tend to have limited knowledge about who can access their data, what they can do with the data, and what the consequences of privacy intrusions may be, not to mention the complexity of algorithms applied to process their data. And as a result, informed decisions become almost idealistic. And on top of all that has been mentioned, the range of stakeholders involved in the implementation of learning analytics means there are different expectations to balance. In Europe, the European General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, has placed the pressure on higher education institutions to ensure that consent is first sought before any collection of personal data, unless it's legitimate or of public interest. And JISC, a not-for-profit organization from the UK, has advocated for consent to be obtained only prior to actioning interventions. However, students do not necessarily share this view. And the question is, whose data are we talking about and who is talking about it? Although the awareness of including students in the discourse of ethics and privacy has risen in recent years, only a handful of studies have focused on involving this group of stakeholders. Institutions have the fiduciary duty to serve the best interest of their students, but failing to consider students' awareness and attitudes regarding the use of their data for learning analytics may lead to unintentional harm or negative experience. So in light of this, we set out to explore the relationships between individuals' privacy beliefs and the related behavior. So let me just give you a little bit information about our research background. So the case study is based on in a UK higher education institution, which is probably quite easy to guess now. The data was collected between 2016 and 2017, and learning analytics was not yet introduced to students or staff, and the university was in the process of developing a strategy and policy for learning analytics. So the strategy and policy development was intended to ensure that learning analytics would be owned by key users and that it would effectively improve learning experience and outcomes. To this end, we explored students' awareness and perceptions of the use of their personal and educational data in the university so as to draw on the findings to inform the deployment of learning analytics. Our research questions are: what uses of personal and educational data do students consider to be legitimate and appropriate in a higher education context? Are there gaps between students' perceptions or expectations of privacy and the actions that they have taken to protect their data? By investigating such gaps, we hoped to identify areas to improve in terms of how we use student data and areas to provide training for. In addition to key literature about ethics and privacy implications for learning analytics, our analysis was informed by the theories of privacy paradox and the contextual integrity. We wanted to know whether there are gaps between student perception of privacy and their action to protect it. Additionally, we were interested in the factors that might contribute to the gaps, thereby informing the way we implement learning analytics. So privacy paradox, this is something we all practice regularly when we are asked about our views towards sharing personal data. We might be aware of the need to protect it. However, in scenarios such as being asked to provide personal information to a shop assistant whom we do not know at all, to collect the loyalty points, or when we are prompted to read online terms and conditions before agreeing to the use of a service, we often say yes without having investigated or understood the implications. This is a common phenomenon observed in consumer behavior known as a privacy paradox. However fast or slow it might take us to say yes, our decisions to share personal data may involve risk-benefit evaluation or no evaluation at all. So in situations where little or no risk assessment is taken, there is usually insufficient consideration of risks. That is to say, the decision will be made solely based on significantly perceived benefits, those benefits that are particularly prevalent to users. However, some common factors may lead to little or no risk assessment as well. So for example, the trust that we place in the service providers, the imbalance of power between us and the service provider, especially in situations where we can only say yes, otherwise we don't receive the service. And low data protection awareness among data subjects is also one factor, and knowledge deficiency, i.e. Not fully understand what will happen to the data that they agree to share with, what the implications are. However, in circumstances where risk-benefit evaluation are taken, they are often subjective and contextual. So for example, we may take yes without reading the terms and conditions of using free Wi-Fi because the perceived efforts required to go through a lengthy document outweigh the perceived risk of sharing the required data. So this is a decision that is based on a rational calculation, but not necessarily an informed one. On the other hand, the norms in a context also have impact on our decisions, what we consider as appropriate in terms of sharing the information about ourselves. So these contextual norms depend on the nature of information that we share, the actors in the social networks, the relationships between these actors, and the relationship between the information and the context. These parameters all affect our perceptions and experience regarding the flow of data, that is what to share and whom to share with. Because of the influence of various factors in a context and an individual's belief system, it is common to see discrepancies in perceptions and actions towards protecting data about oneself. This can be confusing and restricted in a way for the implementation of learning analytics if we focus our question on what data students will be willing to share and disregard the complex social factors that can shape students' intention and behavior regarding sharing data for learning analytics. In light of this, we used both survey and focus groups to investigate potential gaps between what students expect and what they do in terms of privacy protection. We used the SLOC, the Student Expectations of Learning Analytics questionnaire, in this study to understand students' ideal and predicted expectations of learning analytics. So ideal expectations refer to what students ideally would like to see, whereas predicted expectations refer to what students expected to experience in reality. And by comparing the two types of expectations, we may be able to observe the influence of factors in the institutional context on students' expectations towards learning analytics. So this questionnaire contains 5 items related to ethics and privacy expectations, and most of them are about consent seeking, for example, seeking consent before using educational data, before sharing data with third parties, before using identifiable data, and before using the data for alternative purposes. In addition, the questionnaire also asks the students about the expectations of the university keeping their data securely. So in total, we received 674 responses from students across all the degree programs and disciplines. And we used descriptive analysis in this particular study. We further carried out 6 focus groups to investigate students' expectations regarding legitimate uses of their data in the educational context and the actions that they have taken to protect their data. Focus groups allowed in-depth conversation among the participants and between themselves and the interviewer. So this method allowed us to further investigate contextual factors on decisions that students may have made in the past and potentially will be making when learning analytics is formally introduced to them. And the questions that we asked cover 8 topics as I've listed here. And we used the semantic analysis to explore this data set. So findings, it was reassuring and perhaps unsurprising that students express strong and positive expectations across all items about sharing their data to be used for learning analytics. The upper graph here indicates what students ideally would like to see, and the bottom graph shows what students realistically expected to see. And we can see that there is a slight decline in predicted expectation compared to ideal expectation across all the 5 items. So we speculate that students' experience with these practices and their understanding of associated challenges might have led to lower expectations of what would occur in reality. And although the majority of the students express a strong desire for the university to obtain consent before using their data, both the ideal and predicted expectation of the university seeking their consent before using their educational data is comparatively lower. And from our conversations with students in the focus groups, we found that students generally agreed that their personal and educational data should be used to benefit them and to improve the learning environment, so long as the process does not identify individuals. In addition, when students evaluated the benefits of sharing their data and the risks, there was clear interplay among their sense of ownership, trust in the party that collects or accesses their data, and the power relationships among different parties. So for example, we observed a higher trust in personal tutor than other stakeholders. Because to the students, their personal tutor remained the same, whereas people like lecturers constantly change throughout the university journey. And in this conversation from a postgraduate focus groups, we see that student 4 in this group, her willingness to share data is based on an evaluation of the perceived benefits, that is to build her, to help her develop further, and also based on her trust in the tutor. And we can also see a very strong sense of ownership over her data from this student. By contrast, when it comes to sharing data with external parties, students across all the groups expressed a strong distrust, which aligns with the findings of the survey, and also thinking back on the keynote from ShanTsai this morning that that education, edtech companies start to have more and more influence on the policy in this domain. So how do we deal with this is something very important, especially seeing this strong distrust in third parties among students. So here we can see that the change in actors and relationship completely alter the dynamics of the context and hence the willingness of the students to share data. And as I have presented earlier, the students had a strong sense of ownership over their data. Some believed that they are entitled to choose what they want to do with their own data, whereas others believed that there should be shared ownership of the data with the university, especially when it comes to educational data. And here, a partnership with the universities acknowledged, and there is a shared goal that is to improve the quality of educational services. The perceived benefits of sharing academic data outweigh the cost of giving up partial autonomy. But again, anonymity has been highlighted here. The compromise of ideally having exclusive ownership over one's data is visible in this conversation here, where students acknowledge challenges in reality. First of all, seeking consent to use every piece of data may not be feasible or easy. Secondly, students can lose important support, not necessarily because they don't want it, but because they don't understand it. In this situation, the institution's moral responsibility to support students is also hard to fulfill. So we may say that ideally students would like to have a say about their data, but the perceived benefits of sharing their data and the risks or challenges of not sharing their data may have contributed to the decline of realistic expectation observed in the survey data. Okay, what about the actions that students have taken to protect their privacy? When we asked the students about their awareness of the consent they gave at enrollment and existing policies related to the use of their data, we observed similar patterns to our frequent practice of ticking a consent box to terms and conditions without actually reading it. So here you can see the students confessing that they didn't really pay much attention to the policy at the time of the enrollment, and unless issues arise, they might check, but otherwise they don't really pay attention to that. And we can see that students generally took a cure approach rather than a prevention approach towards privacy intrusion in this context. So there is a sense of trust in their university to use their data responsibly. However, we can also see that trust led to students' indifference about finding out what is happening to their data, which arguably worsens the problem of information asymmetry. This comes back to the earlier point that students, if given the option to opt out, may just choose it because of knowledge deficiency. The point here is not about providing opt-out options or not, but that the university's communication of data practice clearly was not effective. And on top of this issue, we have the problem of power imbalance. There really isn't much choice for students if they want to be part of the educational system. The imbalanced power relationship has also contributed to students' indifference about finding out what is happening to their data. So what are the implications for learning analytics? First of all, purpose, access, and anonymity are key benchmarks of ethics and privacy integrity. Based on the theory of contextual integrity, we identified these key factors in the students' risk assessment in sharing their data with the university. So these are the purpose of using their data, who has access to it, and whether the data will be anonymized or not. Therefore, when it comes to the formation of a strategy or policy for learning analytics, these three elements are crucial to ensure that students feel comfortable about sharing their data for learning analytics. Secondly, transparency and communication are key levers for learning analytics adoption. We found that although the institution might have been transparent about their data practice through the development of policies, transparency from the institution does not guarantee that students understand or care about knowing what is happening to their data. This can be problematic when data protection policies such as GDPR place growing emphasis on the responsibility of data subjects to make decisions for the use of their data. Now, related to the earlier point, information asymmetry can impede active participation of students in learning analytics. So institutions should be cautious about the exacerbation of this problem, information asymmetry, due to the trust that students place on the institution. The knowledge to critically judge the appropriateness of existing data usage is crucial to data literacy. Importantly, students need to own their decisions if they are expected to respond to learning analytics interventions as part of the feedback loop. So when introducing learning analytics, an important question that we should ask is, are students free to or encouraged to explore the implications of data disclosure? So to conclude this study, our study showed that students generally held protective attitudes towards personal data and high expectations of how the university should process their data, but their actions to protect personal data did not reflect such awareness. We identified various factors that could impact the risk assessment of offering data to be used for learning analytics. These include perceived benefits and risks, power relationships, trust relationships, and information asymmetry. So one limitation of this study is that it is based on self-reports. While the method is valuable and useful in exploring intentions, it is less precise in terms of the actions that students actually take in reality. So we would like to see future studies to take an ethnographic approach to explore the cost-benefit evaluations that students carry out when invited to use learning analytics. And we believe that this is very important to students' uptake of learning analytics and their action on learning analytics feedback. So, thank you.